What? TikTok today's special. There we go. I don't know why we had an issue with the reception today. Still have reception? Still reception. Yes, baby girl. I think she won something, baby. Boop. Babe. I think she won something. Oh. What's up, Tumultuous? First one today. I don't know who's with us here on YouTube, but welcome. Welcome back. Oh, wow. Today, the chat is kind of dormant. Are you the only one here, Tumultuous? That is so strange. If so, do you mind giving it a few likes just to maybe for it to call a few more people? That is so bizarre. I've never seen that before. What's up, Cal? How are you, man? Good to see you. Check this out. I think you and Tumultuous are the only people here today. I've never seen that before. That is so bizarre. Thank you for the likes. Maybe I'll attract some more. Kylie Green. And wait for a few people to show up. That is the weirdest thing. I've never seen the chat do that. That is so strange. Yeah. Well. In the meanwhile, I can tell you that Inside Out 2 did not disappoint. It was a great flick. I don't know if you saw the first one or the second one or both, but it's really great. It's kind of awesome to see how creative the people who are working on it are. Very well done. In the meanwhile, wow, the chat is really stagnant. Well, I don't really mind as long as we have some of the regulars. Cal, good to see you here, man. Am I frozen? I'm not frozen, right? Yeah, I recommend the second one too. It's great. She basically becomes a teenager, and they did a great job at depicting that transition. Okay, good. Yeah, the chat today, at least on TikTok, it seems to be in a standstill, or maybe they're just sending people slower. Top tail grip. Appreciate you always showing up, Cal. It's really cool, Robert. By the way, you never told me. So if I'm gonna be doing some get-togethers, look at my hair. It's wild. If I'm gonna be doing some get-together in somewhere in SoCal, would you want to show up? Just listening while cleaning house. That's awesome. That's good to hear, crystal clear. I'm glad to hear that I'm Danny Sailors, that I'm entertaining enough for that. Oh, amazing. Okay, yeah, absolutely. I'll let you know. Yeah, so I wanna have some people get together and meet in person and exchange ideas. I think it would be great. Have some cool topics. Welcome everybody. Finally, I see the chat is slowly moving. My name is Danny, and this channel is usually reserved for the simulation hypothesis. Every day we're meeting up to talk about science, philosophy, religion, spirituality, and so on. Recently, I've had on my mind the some specializing podcasts, like for example, the Toe podcast, Theories of Everything podcast. Entertaining, yes, very intelligent too. Thank you so much, Crystal. I appreciate it. And great handle, by the way. And it made me think, every show podcast, they have a particular thing. For example, the one I just mentioned, which I highly recommend, Theories of Everything podcast. Uh, Basically, his specialty is to bring experts in different fields, usually revolving around the big questions. So usually physics, but also philosophy. Sometimes he would have somebody who's talking about UFOs and things like that. But what I like about the podcast is that, and that's his main thing, is that they speak a very technical language. He speaks a very technical language with the experts, which is fun to watch. And I started thinking, do you think the code make up? Cal is asking, do you think the code makes up reality, meaning what you see on wall show property of the wall? I do, yes. Not property of the wall. I think that the way the code codes for reality, it's not really clear because the code seems to be the same across all surfaces and all spaces. I tested it in a few places in the world in different surfaces, but I do think it codes for reality or perception. Also, we can talk more in depth about your attempts if you haven't managed to see the code yet, Cal. Donald Session Juniors. Um, so what could it be code passing through or dimension reality? Yeah, absolutely. It can be a lot of things. I guess we'll only know when we're going to start testing it officially in a more rigorous scientific way. So it made me think, aside from just having fun conversations, which is always great, and I'm going to keep doing it. I was trying to think, what is the common thread that goes to my podcast? Originally, my idea was to just talk to people who devoted their life to their craft. I thought it would be a good focus because usually when people talk about the things that they really like, it's easy to listen to them because they're so infatuated in the thing that it's very attractive and it's fun to listen to. But then I'm not really sure what the podcast specifically is about. So now I guess I'm in the kind of like soul searching phase of the podcast. So I'm going to try and aim towards a more particular goal, even though I'm going to have, obviously still a broad array of people. But the handle that just popped up is "Don't Vote Weird." That's a great handle. So yeah, I get. Oh yeah, I think I remember that Sundays are a little bit slower in general. Baby doll. Ezig. So to all the newcomers, this channel is usually resolved. Usually, we're talking about the simulation hypothesis. My name is Danny, and I'm claiming to have found proof that we live in a simulation. Oh yeah, we talked about it. And usually we meet here daily to talk about science, philosophy, spirituality, religion, and so on. Cal is saying Closer to Truth is another good YouTube channel. Yeah, it's great. It's a little bit. It's true that he is also getting them into the more technical conversation, but it's not as technical as in Theories of Everything. I don't know if you ever watched like a full episode where he talks to a physicist, but he gets into like the weeds with physicists because he also has some experience in that. You see connections with simulation theory. Why is there something versus nothing? You mean with the theories of everything? Yeah. Well, I mean, the big question, right? By the way, the simulation. What's up, Uba? What's up? Oh, she wants the snack. The simulation hypothesis does not necessarily get us out of the problem of why is there something rather than nothing. We're still in the same. We have the same problem, and I do believe that this problem persists all the way to the top of understanding. So yeah, I guess I'm just sharing my thought that I will try and have guests that are more targeted towards whatever it feels like the channel is representing. But at the same time, I don't want to limit the channel to anything in particular. Um, King is asking, why are you crying? You broke or something? Um, I don't know. Are you on drugs? Hey, babe. I don't know. She's crying. She wants something. Is it because she wants a snack or something? Ah? How you doing to Retro Max? Come. Which live? Oh, you mean that day? Yeah. Usually, I have a very limited time during the day, so it's kind of hard for me to find time to do extra things. I will pop up one time. The first time you invited me, I went. But then, I couldn't understand what was going on because it was just a screen that basically tells you to go somewhere else. Is that the live? The live just basically sends you to a different website. Um, let's see. I was doing something different that night. Usually we go live and have guests. Oh, I see. Okay. Well, let me know when the next live comes on, and then I'll definitely show up. Personally, I like a mystery. Why I also enjoy ancient polygonal architecture around the world. Yeah, I like these ideas too. It's interesting because I actually I used to, well, yeah, I guess I can say that. When I was younger, it was a lot more interesting to me, and then for a little while, I got kind of disenchanted from all of these things because I started discovering how full of shit a lot of these people that talk about this stuff are. And now it's almost like it's making a comeback, but now you have a lot clearer communication around these things. So, do I believe in Christ? It's a tough question. I'm seeing a lot of elements in the hyperspace that seem to be pointing to at least the symbolism of Christ being an actual thing. Uh, but I also understand that whatever the real thing is way beyond what we usually comprehend or entertain in our folklores and stories. I take it you're religious. In the meanwhile, I can tell you that, yeah, it's almost like all of these subjects are kind of making a comeback. I think I was just disenchanted when I was growing older to discover how many people just straight up lie about some of these things that all the mysteries that they're talking about, and how little they actually know when the information is pretty easily available if you just, especially now with Google, right? And so I developed a slight allergy to a lot of these topics and the people involved in these topics. But this is where I have to, you know, reopen my mind to a certain degree to be able to interact with these ideas. Israel, all religions are traditions of men. He's the only one who got it right. He also lives till this day. Well, what can I say? Actually, what do you expect someone to say with assertions of this flavor to Retron Max? Real question. Like when you assert something like this, right? Do you have any do you have the receiving end in mind, or do you just speak according to your convictions without thinking about it? You can cool. Can you show me? I don't know what that means. Double slit experiment proves to us that we are indeed in a simulation. Well, funny enough, double slit experiment was actually what was on my mind when I started thinking about these ideas. Uh, but I'm not sure why people think that the double slit experiment automatically says that we're in a simulation. I don't see the connection. You can say cool and possibly ask me to show you what I know. Well, yeah, if you can show it to people, absolutely. How are you showing it to people? I didn't doubt you can. I'm asking how you're showing it to people. Many different ways. One is my testimony. You mean you're telling people about it? That is a little more direct. Yeah, showing the only way you can show to people is if you can actually allow them to see it. Your testimony is not really showing people. Well, it will be interesting to see. Like I said, I'm open to it. Why do you think that? Have you actually explored through practice any of the other techniques? Like, for example, have you ever meditated for many, many hours a day, for months, years? To have some faith. And why is faith important? Double slit experiment is about light moving particles when you try to look at them. Well, not quite. Um, there's a big thing that people miss about the double slit experiment is that an observer is also seeing when the wave function does not collapse. So it's not the person that is changing it; it's that we put a particular set of like an apparatus, a photon detector, and we turn it on, which is still strange. Don't get me wrong, but that is the thing that collapses the wave function. It's the functionality of potentially knowing, not necessarily a person looking at it. Currency of the universe. Faith, interesting, is the measurement itself. It's the fact that the measurement is now determining the fact for this reality that we now have to know where it is, which is super bizarre, but it's not necessarily the person who is present that is doing it. Currency of the spirit. I see. That's an interesting concept. And what got you to that, Troitron Max? What got you to believing in that? Or did you always believe in that? Did you always experience that? Again, why is pleasing God so important? Particles are really small, and light pushes them when you try to light them up. Deep study. I see. Particles are really small, and light pushes them when you try to light them up. Look at. So, Matt, killing it. I appreciate your participation, but that is just so you know, this is not how the double slit experiment works. That's not what happens there. Also, particles actually are not a thing. They're excitations in fields. So, the most charitable explanation you can give, if you want to use the particle example, is that when the excitation is present and the possibility of potentially detecting where the excitation is coming from is present, then you have a decisive world line that determines that has to determine where the particle is going to be, versus when it's the way to detect it is not present, then you have an open field of the wave itself. That was a conclusion of double slit experiment. Yeah, we can't properly observe because he's done so much for us. It's only right. We trying to. Are you open to the possibility, to Antron Max, that we are God, or our perception is God? We try to document aspects of code. Xcode shifts, rotates at 3 revolutions per second. Not to that degree of accuracy. It's kind of hard to. It's kind of hard to determine. He came to see me more than once. The last time he came in a strange vehicle. Interesting. Wait, what is happening? Jesus said we are gods. Got a whole thing on cam, 10 different angles. Came up with the experiment. That was his conclusion. So you saying that you could actually film that Jesus came to see you, and you could actually film it. Do you have the video? Can you share the video? We can properly observe particles without moving them. Yeah, that's the uncertainty principle. But also, it is related to the double slit experiment, but it's not the main mystery around the double slit experiment. So, did you share that before to Entron Max? I can share the video, but first you should try having faith. Well, I don't really need faith because I do see that something is out there, but I can tell you that what I'm seeing very concretely is slightly different. Is that the story of Jesus and all of that is actually part of a larger story, and to for whatever it's worth, I've once been shown the larger story, and the larger story involves all the other elements, not just Jesus. Jesus is but one of many other elements that all connect to this ultra mega story, and the biblical God is there in the picture but is not on the top. There's something beyond that. For what it's worth, to the extent that you're convinced of what you saw, I'm convinced of what I saw. Showing you that having faith will steal your ability to believe and be blessed. He told me I can only show those who have had faith. First, blessed are those who believe without seeing. Yeah, that's a difficult thing for me, especially considering the fact that until we actually started tinkering with the world in a way that we now understand with science, we were dying in our sleep from choking on our teeth. So we kind of have to trust that a little bit. Came here to cast out of society. So the question is, if one image is being shown to one person and another image, and when I mean image, I mean an actual scenario, is shown to another person, how do we go about determining who has the more right picture? Especially if some of these ideas are competing with one another. If we all just going to be convinced of what we believe and we're not going to use each other as points of reference, then you're essentially going to bring yourself back. My contention is you're going to bring yourself back to the world that existed when we fought wars over basically everything. I'm just saying the experiment did nothing for simulation theory, Yeah, I know. So that's what I'm saying. That the experiment, the double slit experiment specifically, I don't really know how it points to the simulation hypothesis. Actually, okay. If I told you I can fly like Superman, but I could only show you if you believe me first, could you? I don't know. I can try, but it depends very, very highly on the specifics of the situation. Also, what would be the significance of you flying? By the way, why is this important? Oh, send someone an invite. So why people say it does. Oh yeah, I'm the same way. I don't understand why people think the double slit experiment points to can only be self proved. The proof is not shareable in a sense. Well, I'm not. I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily true. So, for example, we can. Reality itself is also something that we all experience from our own perspective, and there's something obviously in the middle. But we also have our own perceptions of it, and then when we share these perceptions, when we talk about it, we create a more coherent image of what it really is at the core. I'm not really sure that spiritual experience cannot be, so to speak, replicated, because again, you have things like meditation that is being taught to, at this point, to millions of people throughout the ages, and these techniques give you direct access. In fact, one of the main differences between the Eastern traditions and the Western traditions is that the Eastern traditions are basically, in a sense, the opposite of the Western traditions. They don't ask you to accept anything on faith. They teach you a technique that if you practice, just like going to the gym, you more likely will experience particular things that will prove to you that something beyond exists. The value of just believing something blindly, I'm not really sure that it's a I personally don't share this value. I don't think it's a valuable thing. Um, and if anything, it sounds to me like like a trick, right? So if you want to say that you have a certain purity, that only when you occupy that purity you can basically accept certain things and see certain things, that makes sense to me to some degree. However, I would submit to you that on Earth at the moment, nobody has this kind of purity. So the chances that somebody's going to see that truth in that way, they're basically slim to none. And I don't see why it should be a problem to take a more the Eastern tradition attitude, which is, look, I'm going to do this technique, I'm going to try something, and I'm going to experience something. And if I'm experiencing it, now it's easier for me to form an image about it. Why would uh, any divine being want any other being to just accept things unless they're some kind of a tyrant? It was frustrated, couldn't observe natural movement of partials. Wait, I'm not saying you experiment are a trust me, bro. Unless wait. I'm not saying I can't. It can be replicated. I'm saying your experiences are a trust me, bro. Unless I have. No, I'm saying that blah blah. I'm saying that you have to. You have to be able to experience something in order to yourself, in order to know that there's something there. Wouldn't know unless I would believe. I already got my proof. Thanks. I like the definition of faith as the optimal thread of relevance to one's unique context. Optimal thread of relevance to one's unique context. Well, I would say that's not faith. That's reason. No, Chase. What if someone trick you and it helped you a lot instead of being a trap? Would you appreciate it? Yeah, but considering the fact that the only thing that ever worked for humanity in large scale is actually putting our minds together and trying to figure things out, and the other thing just killed uh, people for no good reason, like believing that people are possessed and then just murdering them when they just had epilepsy attack, you know. So all of these things, all these criticisms of religion are very, very solid. And you can say, well, this is just people's misunderstandings. Sure, that's the problem. That this door of just trust me, bro, is actually open to too many misunderstandings of the wrong flavor. And that's my point. That we have to have some kind of a better way to assess statements about truth of the world. And if there's some kind of a element in reality that requires us to just believe in order to receive certain kinds of information, that then we should develop some kind of a methodology that also makes it clear to the people who see that science works that there's a worth pocket of reality to observe there. And at the moment, nobody that I've witnessed from the Western religious world has articulated anything of the same profundity and scale that Eastern traditions articulate, because the Eastern traditions are based on experiencing it and not believing it. In fact, unless you can experience something, it doesn't actually get into your body and into your being. If you just believe something with your mind, the chances you're also going to be Jesus-like and not just believe in Jesus, they're basically zero, which is demonstrated by the hypocrisy of a lot of people that are religious but not ethical at all. Passing the blessings. Again, sounds like the ultimate what's the word I'm looking for? Scam. I don't know why Disney is relevant. So, in your opinion, Toretron Max, the Buddha didn't see clearly? Said it about the Disney video until they're rated. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why Disney is relevant. Do you think that the Buddha saw the truth, or do you think the Buddha was confused, or maybe you don't know enough about it? But I'm asking you. Well, so I have news for you. The Buddha actually said that as long as you entertain anything of content in this reality, and Jesus would be content because you're talking about it, um, you are participating in the scam, so to speak, and you will see your own demise eventually because you are being scammed by content, by things that can actually see something beyond you. So the whole point is that the only master, your only master is you, and the only way to get out is to practice yourself to get into a state in which you can actually do that. So this is why I asked you in the beginning of the conversation, to Max, if you have the listener in mind, because you must understand that if you're saying this to somebody that does not automatically accept what you're saying, you just sound like a religious zealot. No offense, it's just what it comes across as. You essentially just push whatever you believe without any consideration of the listener's mind, their state of being, or what they know or understand. And in addition to that, you're also nullifying all other human knowledge, which is at best silly. Because if humans are really known to be good at something, is to be dead wrong about pretty much everything until they figure it out. So if one person believes that they got the ultimate truth, especially if they didn't invest 40, 50 years of their lives into trying to understand it, the belief that they must have arrived at some kind of an ultimate truth is nothing short of delusional. Is what I'm saying. Religious zeal. Well, actually, the Buddha didn't really say anything about reality itself or anything about the spiritual world or anything about the metaphysical world. The Buddha was just involved in teaching the technique, which is just paying attention to your body and your breath. And that's the only thing the Buddha ever taught. All the other content that you know from Buddhism came after from a lot of people who wrote about it because they believe that the Buddha is, the sacred one, the reincarnation of the Godhead. So they added a lot of metaphysical stuff, which might be true, but the Buddha never spoke about it. And you know that how? Toratron Max. You said, by the way, it's really funny. Body has nothing on the Christ. Also, I didn't know he was named the Christ. Um, your experience, but have you ever meditated? How can you know something unless you try the other thing? How much wood could a woodchuck chuck? Not sure. That's a great question. The Christ. So, do you think that there's any possibility that what I said to you is true, which is that Christ is real, but he's part of a much larger picture and he fits into that puzzle, but there's a bigger picture that Christianity is not dealing with? Are you open to that? The Buddha liked lotus nectar. Remember retreats, for example. He can travel, do warfare and meditation. Warfare and meditation? What kind of meditation is that? What do you think of mass psychedelic experiences where people will see the same thing? Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, my contention is that they're seeing the same thing, Mac. They're seeing something real. That's my whole. The whole channel is basically dedicated to the proposition that we in fact live in a simulation, and these substances, they're one way that opens the gates to be able to see this extra content. I'm asking you if you open to the proposition that Christ is real, but is part of a larger picture, a picture that Christianity is not dealing with because it's not aware of it. Are you open to that? I'm on board with you expanding consciousness by going inward in our own way. Appreciate you. Thank you so much, Alyssa. Alyssa? How do you pronounce your name? I'm gonna Google it later and try and see how it's pronounced. Yes, I agree. It's like lifting a veil. Lisa. Okay, well, Steve Sam. I would say thank you for spelling it for me. Matt Killing It is saying I would say the extra content doesn't necessarily mean a simulation. You're right, absolutely. So I don't know if you know, but this channel is dedicated to originally to my discovery, which is that if you project a diffracted laser on the surface and you ingest a particular molecule that I cannot name in a live chat, you will see code running in surfaces. And even that by itself will not tell you that we're in the simulation. But if you then go deeper into, well, first of all, the content that I'm seeing, so at least my conviction is there because it's been communicated to me directly, which I don't expect anybody to take my word for it. Like we said, trust me, bro, doesn't really work. However, if you understand what computation is and understand the computation must be fundamental before the laws of physics, and in that context, simulation just means a slice of reality. Yes, religion is not the way. Relationship with Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. Sensory deprivation allows me to shift right into other realms. No, you're missing my question. I'm asking you: are you open to the proposition that Christ is still part of a larger picture, one that you yourself might not be aware of? Are you open to that proposition? That there's something bigger than that? Simulation itself could be natural and eventually tied to a base. Yeah, only something tells me that if the simulation hypothesis is real, which I say it is, then the reality is a lot weirder than we think. And there is no such thing as base reality. It's just that the whole thing is slices of computational layers. I've had visions of light waves swirling to create pixels to then accumulate and generate a 3D person. There you go. Did you have that? No, nothing bigger than the creator of everything. So I'm okay. So I'm asking you: are you open to the proposition that who you think the creator of everything is yet another element in a much larger picture, one that you're not aware of? And if you're not open to that, why do you assume that what you saw must be the ultimate truth? Is this a simulation and not base reality? It is in a computer we couldn't possibly fathom. True. Or what computation actually is, which is the process of computation itself, is the thing that gives rise to what seems to be structures. Wait, no, yeah, basically, no base reality. That reality is just reality. Is just what it is at the core is computational and not what we call physical. So the laws of physics arise from a deeper computational process, which of course is not a new idea. Wheeler famously coined the term "it from bit" to illustrate this function, which is that the it, the physical stuff, comes out of a bit, which is the computational stuff. This requires a little bit of an understanding of what computation actually is. The function of being able to compute something has a very concrete definition, and the proposition is that ultimately reality is that at the core. And what we discovered with computers, with the fact that we discovered computation, is that that's possible. but it is in fact a fundamental property of reality itself. Infinity have a base? Oh, that's a great question. What would the base reality where infinity exists? Yeah, well, that is the snake that eats its own tail. That is the ultimate question. If so, aren't we trying here to figure out the details of nature of Christ? Um, Wait, aren't we trying to there figure out the details of nature of Christ? Yeah, essentially, it's the same question, just one more button, right? What the bug moves one more layer, which is okay. But where did that come from? If you found out Disney hurt kids and brags about it in movies, would you rip your shirt like Hulk Hogan? That's really funny. Sally sells seashells by the seashore. Do you guys know what's his name? What's his name? That Finnish comedian. He has a really great bit about this. That he was trying to say this phrase, "Sally sells seashells by the seashore," and then in the end he realized that it's a silly sentence to try and learn because Sally would never be selling seashells by the seashore. It's a terrible business idea. Or would you shift and deflect? What do you think of a Large Hadron Collider? What do you mean by what do I think of it? I feel like it's too general of a question. What about Papa of the Seashore? Papa of the Seashore sounds like a great restaurant name. Kind of like Baba Gump. Do you believe in other dimensions? Well, but so if we're talking about if you're talking about from the physics perspective, then it's not really so much a belief thing, but an understanding of what is the logic of why we postulate extra dimensions. But if you're talking about when people say we're going to ascend to the fifth dimension, uh, what I believe is that people that say that don't understand what the word dimensions mean. Much more than that. I feel like this is part of a base reality, but on a sliding scale of size, if that makes sense. That yeah, that's essentially what I'm saying, Matt. Killing it. This is part of a larger reality, but that larger reality actually has infinite layers. Who's the papa of the seashore? Anyone want to guess? Uh, is it Christ? This strange dimensions exist. Why wouldn't there be others? No, it's just that, again, this is why I'm asking, what do you mean by dimensions? If you mean in the sense that we're going to ascend to the fifth dimension, the people who say that, they don't understand what the word dimensions mean, because dimensions are degrees of freedom, right? That's what the word means. So if you have another dimension, all it means is that you can move along this extra dimension and it's completely orthogonal to the other dimensions. So just like you have up and down, and if you move up and down, you can be completely stationary in the horizontal dimension, right? So if you're moving up and down on the y-axis, you don't have to move at all on the x-axis, and that is the definition of why y is another dimension than x. Same goes for the z dimension, right? And this is the three dimensions of space that we can understand and have intuitions about because we're made out of them. And the reason that they're called the different dimensions is because they're orthogonal to one another in some way. In this case, they're orthogonal to one another in a spatial way. And the only reason we understand what spatially means because we can move through what we call space. But the deeper explanation of moving through space is called transitional symmetry in physics, which is that you transition from the state of being here to the state of being here to the state of being here to the state of being here. And that, well, first of all, that's actually a computational way of looking at it. But you still, this distinction of being able to move through one dimension without changing your coordinates at all in the other dimensions is what makes it a separate dimension. You might want to add to that that it's possible to have fractions of dimensions. So like in chaos theory and fractals, you can actually go 1.2 dimensions, 1.3 dimensions. You can actually go fractures of dimensions. But that is the definition of a dimension. So when you say we ascend to the fifth dimension, it's just people's way of saying it's going to be something beyond comprehension. But I don't think that what they mean by that is the actual like moving to another either spatial or a dimension of any other kind. I can say that the mind is probably a dimension because you can probably move in the mind through ideas without moving through space. I'm not sure that you can do it without moving through what we call time. So in that sense, you can say that maybe intrinsically time, transitional movement of information, what we call time, is actually part of what the mind is doing. But that's what would distinguish it as a dimension. This is why I always say, depending what you mean by a dimension. Or dimensions. Dimension is not a measurement, actually. Dimension is a degree of freedom. And it has to be distinct from other dimensions to be called a new dimension. Can you share your ideas about dimensions? That's what I was doing. I mean, in the sense that reality exists, dimension equal this reality. No, not at all. It's a confused use of the word dimension that was injected by things like the Ninja Turtles, right? When Krang is moving to dimension X or whatever it is. So you can say there's different dimensions of reality, but what it would mean in practical technical terms and from physics, we don't have to use it like that. We can use it in a creative way, obviously, but we have to define the terms. So if somebody of tells me something like I just said, which is like we're ascending to the fifth dimension, if I see that we're just having this loose conversation, I don't engage with that phrase on this level. I'm not always breaking it down like this. But if you want my honest opinion about are there extra dimensions, physics would tell you that it's very probable, right? Depending what branch of physics you're looking at. M theory would tell you there's 11 dimensions, one dimension of time, 10 spatial dimensions. And you can go into a lot of more dimensions, right? You have things like Lie groups. The most famous one is E8, that I'm sure people heard of it. And this is basically a projection from, I think, 256 dimensional object down to, forget how many dimensions first, but then to 8 dimensions. It's an 8-dimensional shadow, okay? And Lie groups, if I remember correctly, they represent translational symmetries. But actually, no, symmetries in general, not translational necessarily. But all of these things are like super technical and they mean a very particular thing, right? So I would say, for example, inside of the experiential realm, you can say that the dimension of taste is a separate dimension to the dimension of hearing, let's say. And you can talk about it in terms of like, yeah, but taste is just signals that go into the brain, and then audio is also just air pressure that goes into the brain, so it's also another signal that goes into the brain, right? But that's not referring to the experience of the dimension. Taste is a completely different dimension than hearing, because the experience of taste is completely orthogonal to the experience of hearing something. Now you can combine them to what we see as a full picture of the world, but you can talk about a completely different taste of something without the sound of it changing to any degree. And that is what makes it correct to call it a different dimension, experiential dimension, for example. And time is a dimension. And in fact, in some ideas in physics, you have more than one time dimension. So you can have multiple time dimensions that are different, which is a very strange idea, but it exists. Is electricity a dimension? Man, what am I talking about? No, electricity is not a dimension. Electricity is a protrusion of the electromagnetic force, and it basically a distinction of it from, like, the more you depart from the magnetism, the more you go into the electricity, and this is why movement actually can get you into that. But electricity is not a dimension; it's a force. With degrees of freedom similar to expansion level of consciousness? Uh, Not sure how you mean that, Alyssa. So degrees of freedom simply means that you have degrees of freedom along some continuum. That's the technical definition of it. And it has to be orthogonal to other degrees of freedom. So, which means that any change in that while you're moving along the column of one of the dimensions makes no change to the other dimensions. So, like I said, if you're moving up and down on the y-axis, you can be on x x1 y3 x1 y5 x1 y10, right? And it's always x1, so you're not moving at all through x1. That's why y is a separate dimension than x. So if I can tell you that there's a continuum of experience of taste from bitter to sweet to sour, those are different degrees or different flavors in the experience of taste, right? So you're moving along the continuum of taste. But if, let's say, the object you're tasting also produces some kind of a sound, let's say a hum, and that hum never changes, you can say, well, look, the taste is a different dimension. It's a different degree of freedom because you can move along the degrees of freedom of this dimension without moving at all in the degree of hearing it. That's what qualifies it to be a dimension. AD is a triangle. Wait, or the lattice is go triangle. No, Google E8. It's a really cool thing. E, the letter E, the number 8. Have you ever interface with an entity doing a psychedelic? Yeah, I see them all the time on a regular basis. So if y-axis is dimension, y is the x-axis. So intriguing. Again, so the three dimensions that we know of, the spatial dimensions, so the idea came about. There are three separate dimensions of space: up and down, horizontal, right? Oh, backwards and forwards and to the sides. Now you can say, well, the plane is one dimension. Well, no, because you can talk about three different degrees of freedom. And again, the definition is that if you can move along one without changing your coordinates along the other two or all of the other ones, it qualifies it to be a separate dimension. So if I can move up and down without moving at all in sideways and back and forth, that means that y is separate, x is separate because you can move sideways. So just like I went x1, y3, x1, y5, right? You can go y1, x5, y1, x1000, y1, x -3, but it's always y1. So because you can move along x without moving along y or z, that means x is a separate dimension. Same thing goes for z. But it would just, these are just letters, arbitrary letters we attach to a degree of freedom. That's what it is. You can move through time. What's interesting about time is that technically we can't see that we can move backwards. Maybe theoretically we can, but we're just kind of moving through time, which is what made some physicists to postulate that time is not necessarily a dimension. But we use it as a dimension because in space-time, which is one entity, when you're moving along, if you're bending space-time itself, you actually have different rates of change of time itself, physical time. We know this to be true because we actually have to take this into account when we're calculating the trajectory of satellites, of GPSs, that if we don't recalibrate them every single day at midnight with our home base at home that is using these triangulations to send signals to GPSs, these GPSs will actually drift by a few hundred meters every single day from the actual target. So you have to take into account the fact that physical time is moving different from for the satellites, because both the fact that they're further away from Earth and the fact that they're moving very fast. So you have to calculate, this is both special relativity taken into account and general relativity taken into account. Both of them deal with two different factors of the same effect. One of them is dealing with when you're closer to a body of mass, physical time is moving slower, actually moving slower. And when you're moving faster, the same thing happens. You're moving in time slower. And you have to use both of these equations to actually calculate and then reset, because the home base device that sits on Earth is moving through a different physical time, albeit very minutely, but it's moving in a different time than the satellite because it's closer to mass. So it's technically moving slower through time, but it's also stationary. So it's not moving fast. So in that regard, it's moving faster in time. And you have to take both of these into account, find the exact part where they match, and then reset it to that every single day. And we do this. This is something that is done on a daily basis. So we know for a fact that there's such a thing. So technically, your head is moving faster in time than your feet, because your feet are closer to the mass of the Earth, central mass. So now, very, very minutely, obviously, almost indistinguishable from ever mattering in a human's life, but it's true. In fact, I forget the exact numbers, but the person who spent the longest in space in the International Space Station was technically younger than everybody else on Earth when he came back by, like, I don't know, like a fraction of a second or something like that, because he spent so long in space. So all that being said, the reason that time is you can talk of it as a dimension is because there's different rates of change of time, which are relative to your movement through space. And it sounds like it's a little different because they sound like they're dependent on one another, but there is the more mass you have. I think that the easiest, most colloquial way of saying it without getting into the math is that the more you borrow from existence, the more mass you take, so the more massive you are, the less you move in time. Does that make sense? So like the more spatial stuff you borrow, the less you interact with time, and vice versa. So you can technically say that you're moving. This is why light that has no mass is not really moving through time. There's no time for light particles. They just it always exists in this eternity, essentially. Again, if you really want a really good illustration of this that is relatively easy to understand, you can search Vsauce, which is, if you don't know about it, it's a great channel. Michael Stevens, Vsauce, and if you do his episode on, I think, gravity or mass, he does a really good illustration with like a cone. He shows you like how timelines work in the universe. It's a really good demonstration of this. Times even said it wasn't right. Matt killing it. No, that would be wrong. You said, I don't think we have evidence of fabric of space-time. Einstein even said it wasn't right. That would be wrong. This is one of these things that we know with the most amount of certainty in science, almost more than anything else. The only thing that surpasses Einstein's equations, Einstein's discoveries, is quantum field theory. But this is one of the most concrete things we know about the universe. Einstein was right in so many different ways that it's kind of mind-boggling. If Christ created all, okay. So my feet are the youngest part of me, basically. Yeah. No. Yes. See, it's confusing. That is correct. No, your head is moving faster in time. So any closer to mass, moving slower, which means, your feet would actually be younger. Correct. Because they had less time in which they existed. And this is also why there's no such thing as an absolute time for the universe, which is one of these, like, it takes a second to get your mind around that. But the Andromeda Galaxy doesn't just exist in a different space. It also exists physically in a different time. So if you count, let's say, imaginary seconds from the beginning of the universe, there is no one overshadowing clock ticking from the beginning of the universe for the entire universe. It doesn't exist. If you're far enough in space, you're literally physically far enough in time. Not just because your inability to go there and verify, but because the physical time, the amount of seconds that ticked from the beginning of the universe, are different in different places in space-time. This is why it's called space-time and not space. So the Andromeda Galaxy is literally in a different time from the beginning of time than we are, not just in a different patch of space. And the if it's confusing, why they always use the twin paradox to illustrate the this effect, time dilation. And you would say, wait, but they are going into space. So why are they? Why do they always say that the twin that went into space is the younger one? If you're saying that my feet that are closer to the ground are the younger one, well, that's because that's general relativity, and special relativity talks about motion. Wait, is that correct? I think it's correct. Yeah. Um, um, if I messed it up, apologies, but I think it's correct. But when you move faster, it's the same as being around bigger mass. So they use the twin paradox because the twin that is going faster, close to the speed of light, is the one that is for whom time slows down a lot more than your feet on Earth. And that's why when they come back, they're a lot younger. Curiosity repeating his name. Do you believe occult practices are legitimate for gaining knowledge from entities? Did you know that the okay? So from what I know, you don't really gain knowledge from entities. They're not allowed to tell you anything of real value that you haven't known yourself. But if you guess in the right direction, they can kind of play a hot cold game with the concepts in your head, in which they would basically tell you if you're close, and then you can kind of gauge from there. But they cannot give you real information. That's my understanding of how it works. Everybody, give me 1 second. I'll be right back.
You thirsty?
We have some what?
Water.
What do you mean?
There's no water.
No, baby. All right, we're back. So, oh, thank you for always helping out with the names, Cal. I appreciate it. Vsauce, and then do mass and gravity. It's a really great. By the way, what complicates the whole picture is the disagreement that quantum mechanics has with classical, well, not classical physics, but I guess Einsteinian physics, is that the attempt is to then describe the world in terms of quanta. And then you don't have a choice but to try and postulate a particle that for every single thing, both in terms of the quantum fields that exist that gives rise to the particles that we see, bosonic matter, and then all the particles responsible for forces, all the fermions. And so far, we couldn't find a graviton, a particle that has to exist if quantum physics is correct. So something that carries the gravity, because according to quantum physics, the Einstein's picture is not correct. So it's not that space bends, but it's all quantized. It's all basically units. This is why there's such a big conundrum between these two. And only when we play with things like black holes, that's where they kind of meet, because the extremes of both the forces that govern the very small and the forces that govern the very large all of a sudden start interacting with one another. We can take back, make me wonder if it's on our heads. Gang signs mark you for the angles. Huh? What do you mean by we can take back, Cal? Makes them wonder if it's all in our heads. Well, no, it's for sure all in your head. Like with 100% certainty, it's all in your head. I think it's just that what what you mean by in your head might needs to go through some redefinition, because everything you perceive right now is necessarily in your head. It's a some kind of an interpretation of whatever in fact exists, if even if it makes any sense to talk about anything external. But it does make sense to talk about regularities, either it's all mind or not all mind, doesn't matter. It does make sense to talk about regularities, because even if it's all mind, the fact that the wall is the wall is a regularity of some kind, that is a boundary that at least at the moment you cannot cross. Literally, you cannot cross the wall. So it makes sense to talk about it as a real thing. This can give new information we can retain in this reality. Yeah, it's just that you have a role to play, and that role is to figure things out for yourself in your own environment. He didn't know entities unable to give information. Oh wait, let's see if what else I missed here. Oh, and I believe occult practice a legitimate game. Oh, that's what I answered, right? You're not contributing or exploring out of curiosity. You're just repeating his name. You got it, Kiro. Thank you, Cal. Appreciate you, man. Yeah, Vsauce is amazing. Are we living in a simulation? I say yes. You can watch my videos that are pinned to the top on TikTok to find out why I'm claiming this. I don't think we have evidence on the fabric of space. Oh, okay. So I went far enough. Top orange. Yeah. So as for the role of Christ and the role of faith, I think the big conundrum is, if it is true that there are certain things that we have to take on faith, we also have to acknowledge that what we've done through the scientific method is nothing short of incredible. And we cannot just pretend like that's not a thing, right? We can't pretend like we didn't make the world better, at least physically. And even though I would agree that we have a lot of work to do in terms of our spiritual inner world and the exploration of it, especially in the Western world, we can't just pretend that the scientific method and the way that we go about things now is not playing a major role in the comfort and the better future of both humanity and honestly of life in general, because life would probably not be able to survive as long if beings like us would not arise and at least potentially have the ability to take life beyond the planet, right? And even though there's probably more things like us in the universe, that is the role of things like us in the universe, which is to be the custodians of life in general, which is spread life, if we can get over our own humps and all that stuff. And now that we go back to these religious ideas, and I am noticing that there's an uptake in this kind of attitude. I think that the new thing that has to happen, because like I always say, we're not going in circles, we're going in spirals. So when you go in a spiral, you go up. So even though you repeat the same season, you should repeat the same season from a higher perspective. The higher perspective has to be, we have to take into account both things, both the fact that there are certain things about our spiritual inner world that we have to understand better, but also we cannot just chuck and throw away the progress we made from physical sciences, because, well, if it is the divine plan, nothing happens for no reason, right? So there's God. Even if you believe that God wanted us to go on this journey, then God must have wanted us to develop science for a good reason and to put it to good use. There are more things going on than we are aware of. That is absolutely true, Lizzie. Very, very true. And this is why I always say and always will say we should always strive to walk the middle line and not be so extreme with our convictions that the thing that drives us personally must be the thing that drives everything. If you believe in Christ, and this is something that you believe is very important to the salvation of humanity, wonderful, as long as that plays a role of helping other human beings getting to that other place. When you preach, what you're doing is you alienating most humans, even if you don't realize you're doing it. And I'm not just talking to you, Tetron Max, talking to anybody who employs this kind of technique. You will never convince most people by lecturing them. That doesn't work. Not understanding that part about human psychology and drive all the way to the end of time and then the end of it just to say, see, you should have listened. That's not a fair system, which I don't believe a system of this flavor would be devised by a divine being. You would have a system that caters to every person's ability to comprehend and every person's frame of the world. This is why understanding that different people have different ways of understanding the world is very important. So you can place yourself in the other person's mind and communicate to them in the way, especially if it's important to you to communicate that to them, and not just to be right, but to actually deliver the message. You don't get to say, well, if you didn't understand me, tough. No, it's your job as a communicator to figure out how to speak to people in a way that they understand. That will require you to study deeper into how people receive information, which science can actually help with that. So the way that I see it, the only way that we open these higher gates is if we merge the left and the right hemisphere of humanity and allow ourselves to be more sensitive to explore the present moment, but at the same time, not pretend like all the work that we've done on the physical side with science and things like that was for nothing, because of course it wasn't. We'll never understand if you don't ever hear it. Uh, no, maybe yes, maybe no. Ideas can help you spread certain interest through the world. But this is why I was saying it. I don't know if you were here for that part of the conversation. The Eastern tradition does not rely at all on saying anything to you. It's just to teach you the techniques. The techniques will open the doors for having certain kinds of experiences. People truly know anything only when they experience something. So if you can give people a certain way to experience something for themselves, that is the thing that's going to put them on the right place, and that is the thing that's going to make them connect to the universe and everything else. Some people, they just like to follow other people. They will listen to a certain degree to other people without ever needing to experience it. But when push comes to shove, when the moment is going to come when they have to cross the line themselves, they won't have the tools. They won't have the cognitive tools. They won't have the spiritual tools. These tools have to be developed from the inside. Nobody can walk that for you. You have to develop it within you. And that is the difference between the Eastern approach and the Western approach. So even though it is true that you can convince people of certain things, this kind of test that we're talking about here will have to be individual on the level of certain abilities that are internal. This is why teaching somebody how to fish, so to speak, versus giving them fish is the only way to go. That's my contention. And yes, some ideas are very beautiful and infectious, but they are not the thing that is making the difference ultimately. Ultimately, you have to be able to walk the path yourself, discover it, experience it, and that is the only time where you will know these things for yourself. Repeating Christ is King or any other proposition about the world without somebody experiencing it first is just like talking to a wall. If somebody didn't experience it, they have no way of connecting with what you're saying. Is a lie along with the yeah. All right. Well, I think honestly, I think we explored this idea as deep as it's gonna go, because ultimately, I think I can summarize it like that. I would submit that you can never convince anyone of anything unless they at least have had a glimpse of an experience of that thing. Um, it for example, there are some examples in which it kind of breaks down. And I have to think about why it's different. So, for example, if somebody's blind, it's true that if they were born blind, they don't necessarily have to, they don't take it on faith that vision exists, because they live in a world in which a lot of other humans exist, and these humans are just like them in every way aside from that one way that they never experienced before. But because everybody else are telling them, I think it's a safe statistical assumption that is something that you're just missing, right? um, but it is true that in that case they don't really have any intuition of that thing that we call vision, and they've never had it, right? So in the same way, if somebody's spiritually blind, so to speak, even if a lot of people will tell them about it, even if they listen to you and believe you because they see the good that it's doing in your life, unless you can develop some kind of a tool for them to be able to see it, you are not being compassionate enough, because you refuse to accept that maybe some people don't have certain scruples you do, and then they have to be able to understand and maneuver through that spiritual world in a different way because they're blind in that way. So just because they were born blind spiritually should not condemn them, right? And a divine being would not create a system in which you condemn just because of a handicap that you were born with. Now, you can say that kind of handicap cannot be possibly be true. I'm telling you, it absolutely can. Just like everything else in the universe, things sometimes don't work exactly how they're supposed to, and it's like a mishap of some sort, and then you need to be able to correct for it. In order to understand what's going on, you need something called knowledge. Knowledge is a real force in the universe. And that is the thing that ultimately binds everything. Even the highest understandings of the spiritual kind, they're still communicated and transmitted from one being to another through some form of knowledge, either of a technique of how to get there, or an oral tradition that tells you about certain things existing and then putting you in the right column of experience, just like religions do. But ultimately, you always want to aspire for a more universal image of whatever it is. There's the more universal the knowledge is, the more it's true about everything. Insisting that something is true is not knowledge. There's just, you might be right. You might have an intuition. You have some kind of eyes that other people don't have, but that doesn't help the other people. The other people have to have a way to interact with it directly, which is one of my, for example, impediments of communicating about the laser. Unless people saw it for themselves, they're constantly trying to explain it away because they don't have an experience of it. They don't see why it's unique. By experiencing it, they get a set of information that they couldn't possibly get unless they would see it first. And that applies to everything. So whenever I'm speaking to somebody, I'm very aware that unless they've experienced what I'm talking about, the chances of us actually speaking about the real thing, because they don't have a reference in their minds, it's very low, if not impossible. And this kind of understanding is something that we should always lead with when we're talking to somebody who didn't necessarily have our experiences. And this applies to Christ as well. If somebody never felt Christ, you can't just tell them, well, if you just, well, you just really need to wish and you will. You don't know that. They might be missing some part in them that prevents them from seeing it in that way. Their mind might be working differently, right? So if you truly care about communicating this stuff, your job as the communicator is to figure out what is it about them that is different, and then helping them see it from their angle. It's not their job, if they never experienced it, to try and figure out something that they just weren't born with the eyes to see. You research cultist Jack Parsons and his knowledge of such an extraordinary young age. Nope. Why specifically a cultist? Why is it specifically from there? Why can't we say, Mac, that knowledge just comes through introspection on all levels? I grew up in the desert talking to ants. I don't think Eastern or Western thought is accurate. That's really awesome. So what did the ants say? I wonder. Wait, did you actually grow up in the desert? Where? Uh, Matt Killing It. Yeah, I know Tim Minchin. I really like that comedian, but I don't know if I know the song "The Fence." Storm is a great bit by him. Wonder if one day we could use Neuralink to trigger the brain similar to a molecule. Oh, I bet we could. I don't see any reason to doubt that. Yeah, let's see. They never said anything about, but I still talk to them. Arizona. Did you ever explore deeply into any of the Eastern or Western tradition? Yeah, so they don't understand math and science. They don't believe it. It is still real. I like the handle Smoking Pirate 69. Well, he directly relates to it to his occult practices. He created the first rocket engine. What was his name again? The answer more vibes than words. That's for sure. Why is the laser key to seeing the code? I'm not sure. I think coherent light is the key. So basically, if you have, because the particles are all on the same energy level, they come back to you. That's actually a great question. They come back to you with coherent content from that layer of the light. Maybe that's why. Maybe that's why regular light doesn't work. I'm not sure why the diffraction matters, but it does because you can't see it with a laser pointer. Do these? I keep missing session. A Forest Fisk. I do it every day, every single day. And it's true that the time varies, but it's usually between somewhere 5, because I usually go for like an hour to 3 hours, depending on the flow of the day. And I start anytime as early as 4 p.m. Pacific time. The latest I ever started, I think, was 8 p.m., but usually it will be between 4 and 7 p.m., somewhere around there. And I'm glad to see that you care enough to ask. So, welcome back. Jack Parsons. I'm going to look it up. Jack Parsons. So, I can tell you that information definitely becomes more available in higher spaces, but I don't necessarily think that it has to be from an occult direction. Extremely close to Alcide Crowley, and his writing even mentions summoning demon. Very cool. Try and come back when I can. Absolutely, please come back. Have you tried polarizing the laser light? Yeah, I think I have. I don't remember what the result was actually. That's a great question. I'm going to redo it. I have been down many rabbit holes in philosophy. So the reason I'm asking also about the Eastern tradition, Matt killing it, is because Eastern traditions don't rely on philosophy; they rely on experience. I've discovered that people who experience pareidolia have more spiritual experiences. Curious why? I wonder if it's relating to what's his name? Hold on, I'll tell you. I think I had it over here. Uh, he's a scientist from. Damn, he's the guy that one of the more respected scientists who also studies people who were abducted by aliens. What's his name? Cal for the rescue. Come on, you know it. Um, dude, what's his name? Gary Nolan. Gary Nolan, I think, right? So if you look up Gary Nolan, um, should you Google? Gary Nolan talks about people who were abducted, something like that. And I'm sure you're going to come up because he says it a lot. There's something that is different about the one of the sides of the brain, or there's like something in one of the lobes that is responsible for some kind of a higher communication. It maybe that's why, and I wonder if they're linked. So Gary Nolan talking about people who were abducted by aliens and what's different about their brain, something like that. Just Google it, or ask ChatGPT. But that might be the answer actually. There's a great deal of philosophy. The Buddha talked like Socrates with different words. So yeah, no, Matt killing it. If this is something I repeated quite a bit recently, but that is actually not true. The Buddha never once spoke one word about anything beyond our world. All the Buddha did was to teach how to meditate. That's all he ever did. All the metaphysical stuff and deep philosophical stuff came after the Buddha, and people attributed it to different things that Buddha said, but the Buddha never said these things. His whole focus was just on the practice. Early news life, basal. Yes, thank you. Basal ganglia. Appreciate it, Johnny. Aliens, what are you? Basal ganglia. That is exactly what I was talking about, Lizzie. So, Johnny, for the rescue here. The basal ganglia of the brain. Yeah, so Matt killing it, like all the stuff you hear, the philosophical stuff, it's more like interpretations that came later. The Buddha was very clear. You sit, you pay attention to your body, to your breath, that's it. Nothing else mattered. And then you figure everything else by yourself. Look up Sacred Pathways, book Todd Murphy. Thanks, Kiro, but usually, and I don't do this out of being mean or anything like that. It's just that I have a million things on my plate, and I'm already always reading like 8 books at once. So the chances of me looking up a new book, unless you tell me why it's interesting, they're very small. But you're welcome to tell me about it and why you find it interesting, and I might check it out. Well, I never spoke to Buddha and only know what people said he said. No, so if you read the actual, actual any like real contemplative work about the Buddha, nobody claims that the Buddha said these things. These things came and were said about the Buddha. There's very little that is written directly from the Buddha. I forget the name of this book, but there's only one time actually in Buddha's history in which he said anything about I guess what you would call metaphysical, and because somebody asked him what is out there, like what is outside, what is nirvana, right? And the only thing he said about it is that he essentially said you have to get out of the house, by which he meant you have to get out of the karmic cycle. That's it. And then people asked him, like, yeah, but why? Like, what's out there? And the only thing he ever said about it, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, whatever you think you want is out there. That is not the point. The point is that when you're going to get out and you're going to look back, you'll understand why I told you you have to get out of the house. That's the only thing he ever said. But he never talked about other realms. He never spoke about other gods. All of these things that definitely exist in Buddhism came from people that came after the Buddha and wrote about him. But the Buddha never mentions any of these things. But Socrates said similar things. He just called it thought, not meditation. Yeah, but thought and meditation are very, very different. Meditation is not contemplating thoughts. Meditation is just paying attention to the reality as it appears right now. So you're paying attention to your body, you're paying attention to your breath in a particular way, in a particular sequence. That's it. The thoughts are actually the thing that can steer you away from what reality is actually doing. In that regard, not only it's not the same, it's actually the absolute opposite from one another, which is what the main difference between the Western and the Eastern thinking. New studies are showing atoms have conscious that changed everything, light and frequency. Thanks for the comment, Smoking Pirate, but that is... I'll tell you why that's not even possible, because we don't know what consciousness really is. We know we have it, but we don't know what it is. So you can't even forget about proving that even animals are conscious. Now, obviously, I would assume that we all understand that animals are conscious and other humans, and we are somehow one consciousness. That's fine. We can talk about it. But in scientific terms, like in concrete terms, not only you can't know if an animal is conscious, not only forget about knowing that an atom is conscious. You don't even know if other people are conscious. All you know is that you're conscious. That's the only thing you know. So that would not be like, if you're talking about like science, that would not be possible to do that. But if you're saying there's schools of thought that say that, absolutely. There's a philosophical position called idealism, which essentially says that we're all, hey, Patricia, good to see you. We're all one mind. Basically, Hinduism kind of crept into Buddhism after some time. Well, so no, so Hinduism existed before the Buddha, and Hindu God, like all of that existed before the Buddha, and the Buddha is just a title, as I'm sure you know. There were many Buddhas, but the Buddha, the one we're referring to, is the Buddha. He essentially, what he contributed is that it's exactly, this is the reason why I'm saying he never talked about all this metaphysical stuff, is because his contribution was that focusing on any of these elements will only keep you in the house. In other words, it will prevent you from being able to achieve enlightenment, which is the only thing you want. So what he discovered is that unless you put your full attention on just the practice, without listening to other people, ideas, believing in God, faith, if you don't steer your attention away from these things and focus only on your direct experience, that is the only way to what he called get out of the house. That was his contribution. But all the stories and even the practices, by the way, the Buddha didn't invent meditation. Meditations existed. It's just that he realized that there's a particular thread in the middle of all these meditations and incantations and repetitions and all that stuff that is the only flavor that can actually get you into enlightenment. In other words, you purify the mind fully. The only way out is to purify your mind fully. That was his discovery, you can call it. But the Hinduism existed before the Buddha. Now, I actually don't know enough about the history to say that the way that Hinduism is now in its modern form, the way we know it, how far back it stretches. I think it stretches way before the Buddha, but I don't know if there was like other versions of it and then they went through modifications. I don't know enough about that. I'm not going to pretend like I do. But definitely all of these traditions and religious beliefs and all that stuff existed before the Buddha, and meditation also existed before the Buddha. He just introduced this one element of full focus on the practice and nothing else. And so it is true that the Buddha didn't speak of anything metaphysical, but he had a lot of stories they would tell to illustrate his points. I know some conscious people. Unconscious people. Thank you, Elmo. The laser, and I'll answer your question about the laser in a moment, Elmo. The short answer is yes. Different light spectrum we tried, but I'll tell you in a moment. But one of the stories that he uses basically, so somebody goes to the doctor and then they have a disease, and then they come back from the doctor gives them a prescription for these pills. And then the first thing they do is that they put a shrine of the doctor, and they're like, oh my God, I have the best doctor. They gave me the best prescription. And they pay respect to the doctor's shrine every day, 3 times a day at exactly the right hours. They say incantations. They say the right words. They praise the doctor. And then they're not healed. They don't understand why they're not healed. So they go back to the doctor. It's like, well, I don't know. Like, I'm like, I'm respecting you, the fact that you're so smart and you gave me the right medicine prescription, and why am I not being healed? And the doctor just looks at them and goes like, well, you kind of have to take the actual medication. And then they go back and they're like, oh my God, my doctor is so smart. He could see that I had this problem. Then they go and they walk around town and they tell everybody about the best doctor. They're like, you don't understand. You have to go to my doctor. My doctor is the best. Not only that he understands what I need, but also he told me why I'm actually not being healed, even though I'm praying every day. So there's these layers, right? There's the belief in the thing, which according to the Buddha will not get you out of the house. There's the paying respect and believing and talking, intellectualizing the thing, which will also not get you out of the house. But a lot of people believe that that's part of the practice. And by the way, Christianity is kind of believing that as well, right? But then the Buddha said, unless you're willing to go and take the medication, which is you yourself, you have to do it you do the work. You actually have to sit down. You have to meditate. You actually have to pay attention. You have to use your attention to pay attention to what's really going on, and that will take you to the final goal. So essentially, unless you take the medication, instead of praising the doctor, instead of talking about the doctor, unless you do it, you will never reach the final goal. You will never get enlightened. And that was the contribution of the Buddha. Have you ever had any dreams that change my life? What's up, Eric Doggin? Not that I can think of, no. I'm assuming you have. Is a thought guided by the universe, but I don't know anything. Yeah, no, definitely. You should. I was talking about it because I just did another Vipassana retreat. You should definitely try one. Met killing it. I think they have some centers in Arizona as well. So again, if you just Google Vipassana, Vipassana, it's free. You can just sign up. And just put Vipassana Arizona. We'll show you the closest center. You should definitely try it for yourself. Meditation is anything but thought, even though thought always comes in, but you're actually trying to pay attention to the reality as it presents itself through your body. What can you tell us about the video documentary you are making? Main thought, release date, etc. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I'm gonna be posting a link to some of the reels with the GoFundMe page that we already created. Some people here actually donated. Cal, you're one of them. Thank you so much, brother. Because we got a investment that we've been working with so far, and now we're gonna go into doing some crowdfunding just to do another portion of the production. I would assume release date will be in about between 4 to 6 months. We're still working on it. Post production will probably take a month or two. But the movie will include my story, kind of reenactments of some of the key portions of the story, and then we're going to be interviewing some interesting people for the movie, and it will include obviously some people who've done the experiments and their responses and all that stuff. Definitely going to be very entertaining. But I'll be posting it on my. I'm going to be posting it on my page when the reels are ready. The brain role in religious and mystic experiences explains neuroscience to explain enlightenment. Wait, the brain's role in religious and mystic experiences explains neuroscience to explain enlightenment. I'm not sure that I'm following the logic, Kiro, but maybe if you hope everyone is there. Oh, you mean that's what the book is about? How are you, Spore Muse? Faith is a matter of consciousness. I think everything is a matter of consciousness. Speak with humble authority that is appreciated. Thank you. Oh, well, thank you so much, the world teacher. You always sound nice to me. What is it to get out of the house? According to the Buddha, getting out of the house is getting out of the karmic cycle. When the Buddha said the only way out, did he mean during meditation or afterlife or both? Outside of existence itself. He meant nirvana. Out of the house means out of the karmic cycle, out of everything that exists, basically out of reality itself. Not just our reality, but everything that exists, all the way to the highest of gods, all the way to the bottom of hell. You get out of all of the cycle. Even the highest of blisses, all the way up at the top, you're still in the karmic cycle. So that's still in the house. The Buddha was talking about something that is outside of the house. So when he was asked what that is, he said, there's nothing I can say about it aside from the fact that when you get out, you'll see why you had to get out of the house. That is the only thing he ever mentioned of the metaphysical flavor, but he never said anything else about that stuff. He never answered metaphysical questions. Because one of his biggest teachings was that this will get you into intellectual entertainment and will prevent you from reaching the final goal. I mean, since Hindu metaphysics already existed, it makes sense it crept back into after the Buddha death. Oh, yeah, Chase. That is absolutely true. Basically, they kind of piled up a lot of these concepts on top of what the Buddha taught. And in fact, funny enough, Vipassana is actually one of the only traditions that maintained itself quietly, because it was only like a small sect of people, that is the closest to how the Buddha actually taught it. Like very secular, just a practice, nothing else. Was it painful to sit so much during the Vipassana retreat? In the beginning, it hurts, but then you get used to it. And in fact, according to Vipassana, the pain is actually part of your attachment to matter, and eventually it goes away. And I didn't believe it at first. And somebody asked me what was my biggest realization for this retreat, and that was one of them. That I discovered that in fact it is true, because I had a pain that I thought was a chronic pain that will never go away, and it disappeared. And like I always had it through all the retreats that I've done, and now it just disappeared and doesn't exist anymore. So I've discovered that that proposition is actually true. That all of these pains, they're just unresolved attachments to matter, essentially. If we live in a simulation, then who made the simulators? It's a chicken egg. Copot. Yeah, well, Dr. Asai, you are absolutely correct. That is the ultimate question. To interview for to interview for documentary. What do you mean? The book recommendation? Oh, I see. Thank you so much, Kira. I appreciate it. I would not like to be out of reality. That might be for some people, not me, not now. Absolutely, and you're gonna keep going through it until you decide that it's a good goal to have. So he got out of the house and came back to tell us how he reached the final goal, according to the belief. He reached the final goal, and essentially, when you reach that final goal, your physical body stays alive until your natural time comes, and then when your natural time comes, you no longer reincarnate. The only thing that keeps your body alive is the momentum of the final attachments from this life. But when you relinquish all attachments entirely, which is the final goal, then when you die, you no longer reincarnate. So it's not like he came back, is that he reached the final goal, stayed alive until his natural course of this body, and then he no longer reincarnated. And in fact, but this is an interesting comment, Cal, because essentially when you reach the final goal, your karma is completely neutralized, which means that you no longer owe anything to anyone. Hey, babe. Babe. He peed on the floor. The puppy's still being, and he stepped in it. It's getting close. Oh, there's more over there. I didn't even see that. Still potty training him. So because he didn't, huh? Because he didn't owe anything to anyone, it was actually out of his compassion. He could have just sat in bliss for the rest of his life, because he got enlightened when he was, I don't remember, 26 or 31 or something like that. I don't remember. Kind of like close to like that age of like Jesus-esque, and then or 35. I don't remember. You can look it up. I don't remember the age, but then he died when he was 80 plus. So for this remaining time, he, out of his compassion, he, I guess you can say, taught the technique to other people, that they can also get out of their suffering. Maybe Christ transcended the house while being in it simultaneously. Maybe, but unlikely, because he would not be content wise. Like if it's, as long as you have, according to the Buddhist teaching, as long as you have any conceptual framework that talks about what it is and then somehow related to what is happening to you here, then you're still in the content game. And the content game is always part of the mind game. So you're definitely not out of the house. The washing of the feet is the most important story in the Bible. Funny enough, because the washing of the feet is also the most important thing right now, because when the puppy pees, he also steps in the pee. So we have to wash his feet. Pain is a taste of death. I made that up. Let's get you on Lex Friedman. Let's go, Johnny. Lex is great. You think Lex played a role? Most for the Buddha, no, but for religions, definitely. So once you have no attachment to the physical, there's nothing to make you come back karmically. Almost. So basically, the relinquishing of attachment is also relinquishing of attachment, not just from the physical, but from anything that is possible. So it's kind of like this ultimate image where, as long as you have any remnants of attachment to an idea, anything really, anything at all, or you have an uneven ground karmically, so like you still see yourself accountable. It's almost because the karma is like personal. So the if you see yourself, there's any part of you that sees yourself accountable for anything or drawn towards something, which will attach you as well, you will still be in the karmic cycle. So only when you, and this is why I said there's a difference between being fully liberated, which is somebody who relinquished any possibility for creating new attachments, and being enlightened, which is the final goal, which means that you have no more attachments of any kind, not just a possibility for new attachments, but you relinquished all attachments to anything. Nothing really matters anymore. You completely disassociated from all of it. And then there's nothing to propel you to the next life, because that is the fuel that propels you between lives, according to the belief. And even, by the way, even that is already a rationale. I'm just telling you kind of like the rationale of like the Buddhist traditions. And this is something that is being talked about in Vipassana, but it is made clear that the Buddha himself did not speak these words. These are rationalizations that people came up with after. All he insisted is sit down, pay attention to your breath, pay attention to your body. That's it. Maybe next life. I just had the same thought about Lex Friedman. Coincidence? Do you think the Buddha was just too polite to tell people to leave him alone? That's funny. Actually, no, the Buddha would not. So being polite means you have one thing in your mind, and yet you express a different thing that you're being wants in that moment. That will be a misalignment. That will be an attachment or a lie or whatever you want to call it. So definitely that would not be the case. The Buddha was basically out of compassion, out of love. He basically wanted to teach it to others, and it was a complete choice, which means you can't really have the Buddha again. If if we're talking about the real Buddha, you can't have a person that is fully enlightened who's telling you something that is not exactly reflecting their state of being in that moment. So if you're doing something, there's this famous story of somebody coming to the Buddha and attacking them, so to speak, like almost like physically attacking them. And first there was a lot of verbal abuse, and the Buddha responded by just asking the person a question. And he asked, do you ever have guests coming to your house? And he says, of course I have guests coming to my house. So he said, well, do they ever bring you gifts? He said, yeah, of course, sometimes they bring me gifts. I was like, did you ever turn a gift around? He said, yeah, that happened. Sometimes I don't like the gift and I turn it around. He said, well, you brought me all these gifts with your words and your insults, and I this is yours. I'm not accepting your gifts. Thank you. And that basically neutralized the person. So the Buddha would never do anything aside from do something for you out of compassion, because he would never gain another karmic owning. And the second that you express something that is not true about what your true state is, that's a karmic owning, so to speak. Shanpreen, if you want to come on, you can put a subject, and if the subject matches what we're trying to talk about right now, I will definitely bring you on. With the atom, I am speaking of the double slit experiment along lines of the Matrix. Yeah, we just spoke about it, Smoking Pirate. It started by me saying I'm not really sure why people think the double slit experiment pointing to the simulation. Even though there's definitely connections between the computational system and the way it would be interacting and how the wave function collapses, I doubt that most people understand the technicalities of it to understand why the connection is there. So, like he was just trying to sit and breathe, and people were just like, hey, what are you doing? It's really funny. I don't think anything makes us come back. We want to be here, I think, so that we can experience. Yeah, I mean, this whole, I guess you would call it new religion of people believing that we're all just one consciousness experiencing itself. I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just saying it's definitely a new religion. And this whole idea that we just come here to experience because we choose. Okay. Yeah. I mean, again, I'm very, very, I'm very open minded about these things because I've seen enough to know that something is going on. But I also lived long enough to know that almost anything that we ever thought that we understood, we didn't. And I think not taking that into account would be foolish. Can't be differentiated individual and out of the house logically. Yeah, definitely not. Who we are and who we want to be. Yeah, Lizzie. Again, I have a lot of friends that are kind of speaking this kind of speak, and I always tell them the same thing. I don't think you know. Are you familiar with the teachings of Lester Levinson? Why is that familiar? Let's see. No, doesn't look familiar actually, but I will definitely check it out. Thank you. And to the question that was asked before by Elmo, did you get the experiment with other types of laser? Green laser, have a power levels, pulse energy. Different colors tried, green and blue. They both work, but they have a different, not different, but additional content aside from the code, which is interesting. Different power, I wouldn't play with that because you can actually damage your cornea. I wouldn't go anywhere above 5 milliwatts, no matter what. And different pulse energy, no. But I am working on a laser that can potentially change. I'm asking different companies to see if we can do a laser that can actually change um, light wave length in real time. Are you familiar with the teaching of less? Oh, sorry, people just wouldn't stop asking. Isn't love an attachment? Absolutely. Oh, you mean like in the context of the Buddha? I'm talking about just full compassion, not like not what's the word? Not lust, which is what most of the time we mean by love. But he wants to sit and breathe, and people kept asking questions. I think if you're in the state, I know you're just joking, Matt Killian, and it's actually very funny. But I think when you're in that state of enlightenment, it's everything is just bliss. It doesn't really matter. Like nothing can derail you from that. Even though there's still physical issues because you live in the physical world, there's nothing that can actually move you from this peace. It's why the guy who wanted to sit and meditate was never left alone. Interesting to think about. Yeah, in fact, the legend goes that he was teaching vipassana till his last breath, literally, or teaching the technique that then now we know as vipassana. It's a wild guy who wanted to. It's about practice of being moved by light, not a simulation. You definitely need to check out the fans by Tim Minchin. Yeah, I will. Definitely will. Does anybody know what these league levels are? I see there's a thing on the top on the left that says League D1. What does that mean? The washing of the. By the way, Eric Doggin, was that a joke or the washing of the feet was like a real comment? Definitely need to check out fans by Tim Minchin. Remind me of the story of the yogi, the original yogi, just doing crazy shit in the forest. People, crazy shit in the forest sounds like a yogi. League levels have to do with how popular your live is. TikTok. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, I don't understand so many things here. It's crazy. Thank you for letting me know, Patricia. Also, good to see you here. Wait, so what is the daily? What is the ranking contrived? But like likes or How many people show up every day, or all of the above, basically? So yeah, I do think that the whole idea of enlightenment in general is, I think it's like likes and give. Oh, I see. Um, I do think the idea of enlightenment is a after practicing for a little bit, a few retreats, it is interesting to watch how the people in the community, when you meet them, they do have this different kind of vibe. They're truly much more present and much more comfortable in their own bodies and in the world. I see. Thank you for letting me know, guys. Let's give it some likes then. Let's get it to 1,000 at least. 1,000 daily would be good. Enlightenment seems lofty. I would like to just suffer less. What do you mean by lofty? Like out of reach? Or what do you mean by lofty? Thanks, guys. Appreciate the likes. Because I think that ultimately it's just, if we have some trajectory of the soul, quote unquote soul, out of reach when I'm in pain. Oh yeah, well, yeah. I feel you there. It's up. It's up. After doing it again, this is why I always recommend it for anybody, because of how convenient it is, how available it is, how the fact that it's free, and even if you can't afford it, you can just go and you don't even have to donate if you can't afford it. Aside from these things, the taste of one retreat in which you go through 10 days of this process makes you see how much you can actually change in a reasonable time, in 10 days, right? And that gives you hope. That's why I always recommend it. It's not like I think that anybody who goes will meditate for the rest of their lives, but it gives you the understanding that it is possible to get to a pretty solid ground in a relatively short period of time. It's 10 days, yeah. They also have different ones, but the first one has to be 10 days because you have to go through the process. They teach you every day is a different part. That's why I always recommend it. It gives you that thing you just mentioned, Patricia, is the thing that actually remedies. It gives you hope. It gives you the understanding that it actually is possible to be in a much, much better state, even in this lifetime. And you don't have to meditate for 20 years in a cave. You can do 10 days intensive, and you will see major changes in your personality and how you view the world. Definitely feels much cleaner. Like the energy just flows lighter. A lot of my friends have done it. Maybe worth looking into. Definitely worth looking into. Definitely. Yeah. Again, the fact that it's available everywhere, free, great accommodation, good food, great people. There's really no downsides. We'll give it. Oh, and by the way, yeah, I'm gonna just remind everybody because every day we don't necessarily have suggestions in that regard. But if you guys want to give me suggestions about topics that you want me to dive deeper into, or guests that you would like me to have on, I'll definitely do my best to get these people. It can be either other creators on TikTok or some just random either scientists or people that you think are worth talking to, and I'll try and make it happen. Let's see what we got there. Feel you about just wanting to suffer less. Yep. Well, again, Vipassana will definitely give you that. You will definitely suffer less. It would be great to hear you talk about Gary. Oh, Gary Nolan. Yeah, Gary Nolan would be great. I actually contacted him. I'll put it back on my list. Originally, I contacted him and I contacted what's his name, Hoffman. And Hoffman was just coming out of a heart surgery, so he was recovering, and it was very nice. He actually responded. Gary, wait, was he? Did he respond? Yeah, I think he responded too. His secretary put me in contact with him. He did respond, but it was, I think he wanted a further clarification. And I didn't really know. It was before I released my video, so my thought on the subject wasn't as coherent yet. and I didn't really have the experience of talking about it in ways that don't sound wacky. So that's where it stayed. But maybe it's worth reaching out again. Hoffman, I also reached out, and again, maybe these people I need to reach out now. Experiment you're trying, people you mentioned Melvin. Wait. Experiments you're trying, people you mentioned Melvin last time. He would be cool to have. Oh, I can try and bring Melvin. Yeah, absolutely. We're a little bit far apart, so what we'll have to do, because he's in England, so what we'll have to do is that live would have to be much earlier in the day. I don't know if that's convenient, but then if I'm going to set it up, I'm going to have to tell you guys in advance. So if you guys want to catch it, it's going to have to be earlier in the day, because right now it's the middle of the night for him. Because Nolan seems credible. No, Nolan's great. Yeah, absolutely. Great suggestion, Cal. I'll try and bring Melvin. He doesn't like public appearances too much, but I'll try and cajole him. It should be fun. Wait. Okay. All right, guys. We reached the 2-hour mark. I think I'll adjourn for today. I was actually kind of under the weather today, and I really had to challenge myself to do this live, but it was great. You guys energize me, and the interaction is always very positive and fun. So I appreciate that about you guys. You guys make it easy and engaging, and I really do appreciate the crowd, especially the people that show up every day, and also the new people. I appreciate you people. It's thank you, and I will see you tomorrow. Peace and love, everybody. Same goes to YouTube. Thank you so much, everybody. Whoever was here or whoever is still here. Elmo, Crystal Clear. Thank you, guys, and see you tomorrow.